Good evening, primetime partiers. It's primetime party time, EX. Welcome back to our 1 hour of all things media and entertainment, live on the air at 9 p.m. at ptptshow.com and on your time, wherever you stream podcasts. Tonight, we are going to compare and contrast the show that self-proclaimed did meta first. That's right, we're going into the world of Yakko, Wacko, and Dot, the Animaniacs. It doesn't quite get more zeitgeisty and zany than this show. Still, watching both the 2020 and 1993 era editions makes you see how much has not changed and how much more this show got to do when it broke away from network TV and arrived on Hulu. Especially a show that revels in poking fun at Warner Brothers and show business itself, it's here to fill the playful, political, and pop culture satire you need in your streaming queue. Or at least that's how we feel. How you doing, Daniel?
Ooh, great intro as always, Tracy. I'm doing well. How are you? What is your toast? What is your roast this week before we get started on Animaniacs?
My toast is that I went to the beach for the first time in a long time with some buddies in this nice post-vax universe. Let's hope. Don't let me down, Moderna. But yeah, no, the beach was really nice. Though the water was very cold, but I felt like obligated to go in because it had been such a long time. And
Fair.
I think it was probably at least below 60. So it was chilly, but it was refreshing.
There's
later,
a couple
and, yeah.
months out of the year that Southern California water is great for taking a dip into, and mid-April doesn't really quite fall into that yet.
April was an aggressive attempt to go swimming sans wetsuit. I will say that.
Yes.
That's usually something you do towards June, maybe Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Depends. But yeah, it was a choice that I made, that I lived with as I shivered.
Well,
no, it was sunny enough to where it was fine afterwards. So it was good.
Very nice.
Roast, which is probably not unique to where I'm at, but I walk my dog a lot for breaks while working from home, and I usually take her on a hike after work if I can, since the nice daylight savings means you got some more sunlight after you clock out. But I have noticed a lot of littering of disposable masks and a lot of people not picking up after their dogs, and I don't appreciate it. I really don't. It was just weirdly a lot more than usual. I don't know if people were just like ripping off their masks, being like, yeah.
Right. Yes.
But I don't know. Either way, maybe they blow off in the wind, but I don't think so. I really don't think so. I don't.
Is everybody gonna have that excuse?
I know,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
It's just masks in the wind. No. You're just a dirty mask litterer. Yeah. So I don't know what's up with that. And I was like close to starting to pick them up. And I honestly am this close to being like the first episode of 30 Rock, where they're like, I'm buying all the hot dogs for the people who stood in line and not this person who cut in line, to be like the trash picker-upper and shamer of people who litter all over the trails. Mostly because if you were like me and own a hound dog, they find them. You might think that you were a sneaky litterer and that no one will find it in the bush that you threw it in. But no, some of us own bloodhounds who smell whatever you've left on your trash, and they dug it out of the depths, and it gives them great joy. It makes me use a great amount of Purell, taking it out of their mouth. So that is my roast. That is my PSA too. Don't litter your mask. You could throw it in your backpack, or I really don't care what orifice, but you should throw it somewhere. It's not on the public access trail. What is your toast and roast for this week?
Well, first, while I didn't get the reference, I appreciated the parody and thought that was a very warranted roast. For my toast and roast this week, they're actually the same thing. I am toasting and I am roasting because much like Wacko on the show that we're going to be talking about tonight, I have been snacking. My cousin gave me a packet of that like the hot spicy chicken ramen
Yeah.
And it was just like the regular, the original flavor. Ate that, quite enjoyed it. Found out that there are a plethora of flavors that you can get and that you can challenge yourself to. So I took a stroll down to H Mart and I grabbed the 2 times spicy, and yeah, I got it. I got it right
You're
here.
competitive.
And yeah, I just wanted to take it up a notch, and I did. And the reason I am toasting and I'm roasting this is because one, it's really, really good.
Ooh, I gotta get some then.
Very, yeah, quite enjoyed it. Uh, it's intense. I almost finished the entirety of the 2 times spicy.
Wow.
And I figured that coincidentally later in the week, I had like a toothache or something. So I scheduled a dentist appointment. And when I went to the dentist, their first question was, have you eaten anything really, really spicy lately? Because apparently the 2 times ramen desecrated my gums, which I've never heard of.
No.
So I don't know if I'm roasting myself for not being able to handle this. If I'm roasting, I don't know, but my gums were roasted. I guess that's what happened here. If any friends of the show, if anybody wants to try out any of these, because I do still feel like everyone should try these. I really enjoy them. I want to see, how far can everybody go? And also, I have extras, so if anybody wants them, and I want to kind of still like, even though this happened, because it's like a billion times better than whatever it could have been otherwise to send me to the dentist. But I'm still interested in doing the 3 times, which is I think the top of the line right now. But yeah,
on a scale to 1 to fry your gums,
yeah, exactly.
is it worth trying the 3 times? It's like, what happens at the 3 times spicy ramen? Just one of your teeth fall.
Gotta know. That'll be the next toast and roast, apparently.
Or just like an eyebrow falls off.
That's a possibility. We should do a little pool. Little primetime pool of how physically just decimated I will get from or anyone from this ramen challenge. This is
I know.
gnarly.
If we did this as a video and audio show, I would say we should do the next episode.
Well,
eating the spicy ramen, but then we might have to tap out and be like, guys, sorry, show's ending after the intro.
We have a YouTube channel. We might be able to get some extras going. Who knows? But yeah, that's maybe more to come, maybe not. Until then, we'll be right back with some Animaniacs discussion. I've been wondering for a very long time exactly what Animaniacs is. What is Animaniacs?
Animaniacs is a animated series, obviously. This is a show that blends wit, slapstick, and pop culture references. The variety show Animaniacs features a large cast of characters whose predominant personalities are the Warner brothers and Warner sister, Yakko, Wakko, and respectively, Dot. 3 inseparable siblings who have a great time creating havoc and mayhem in the lives of everyone they meet, just like show business. The series, which originally ran from 1993 through 1998, also features a number of comedic educational segments, often in musical form, my favorite form. That is the official Hulu logline, with some creative liberties. And it was created by Tom Ruegger. Main cast is Rob Paulson as Yakko Warner and Pinky. Tress MacNeille as Dot Warner. Jess Harnell as Wakko Warner. And Maurice LaMarche as the Brain. Though they all play various roles in addition to these. This show aired between 1993 and 1998 and then also got rebooted on Hulu in 2020 and is slated to have, I think, 3 total seasons. So the first 1993 to 1998 run was for 5 seasons, 99 episodes, and 1 movie. And then so far, they've done 1 season with 13 episodes in the 2020 reboot, and then we should be getting a 2nd season, I think, fairly soon.
I want to say it's slated for this year.
I
No
want to say it's
promises
this
from this
year.
end.
Yeah, we'll see. They haven't made an official air date, I don't think, but it sounds like it's going to be 2021. And then also one in a season 3 subsequently. Watch. Originally Fox and Kids and then Kids WB and now Hulu. So we are seeing a tried and true favorite Saturday morning cartoon on a prevalent streaming platform and rebooted. So that to me says something about the kind of reverence and I don't want to say like affection, but people do have a soft spot for these Saturday morning cartoons, and Animaniacs is definitely falls into the category of cult followed show. There's a specific set of viewers who enjoy this kind of humor and poking fun at everything, and extremely satirical for kids. If you want your kids to, be sarcastic and get in trouble in middle school, then you should definitely have them watch this at a young age.
I was gonna say this sounds like a co-host I know. So you're familiar with the series as it aired back the '90s version?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I watched this in the original as it was airing. It is quite educational as well. I think my mom was a fan of me watching anything that had, some historical context. I think they thought political satire was educational as well. So they're like, start them young. So yeah, they do it in a what's interesting about Animaniacs that you probably find in a good amount of kind of more elevated children's shows is that it's all packaged as a children's show. The characters are very cutesy. They make a lot of both. It's weird how lowbrow and how highbrow it can be at the same time with the humor. Like they're not afraid to do something gross out where like say Yakko eats too many donuts and throws them all up. But then they'll also make like a deep cut like Alfred Hitchcock reference and expect you to know it. So the show is very much you need to know references that you would not have been alive to know. So
Good way to put it.
There's something there for the parents if you're watching this as a kid, and then eventually you evolve and become a hipster that then makes all of these jokes. I don't know if that's the end goal of what they wanted, but it does kind of happen if you if you start having all of these episodes that have really specific references to where I think part of it too is perhaps this is kind of just making a guess, but I want to say a lot of the writers wanted to have it be like, oh, well, once they like see the skit of this, they might want to know what that came from and get all of these kind of landmark references in cinema and television. I think sometimes that's what some of these shows want to get out of the young viewers is kind of pushing them to the classics. But at the same time, Animaniacs, big part of it is it's all set in Warner Brothers studio lot. And a lot of them is them getting into antics that are all about, selling scripts and talking with executives. And that part is definitely not for your everyday viewer.
I was surprised about how much of the show is a workplace comedy.
Yes.
Weird. Since we are talking about the Saturday morning cartoon, essentially.
I know. That's like another aspect of the show that's a good point to bring up that makes it kind of fall into this weird in between category of it's a show that's kind of on the surface a kids show, but a lot of the structure and the bones in it feel a lot more like an adult animation show. But then yeah,
I feel like is it a product of like it just there wasn't otherwise a place for it in a programming block in the '90s. My like initial hypothesis, like going into this episode, is that we'll have the like original run of the series, and that would have to sort of adhere to deliverables of a children's programming block. and then it might be a little more freed up as we get into this like Hulu revival. Just knowing that maybe the audience has aged up with it. Uh, but to your point, there there was a lot more kind of like adult dialogue and reference in the original run. So it is interesting because it does get that distinction of being a part of a children's programming block. But it's kind of like how we might have uh, talked about in the Adult Swim deep dive that we did, is that there really, how many other places for strictly adult programming or adult animation programming were there at the time?
No, there wasn't a lot. And because it was so playful, I could see this is one where, obviously when someone reviewed Cowboy Bebop, they're like, this is for adults, no questions
No
asked.
questions there.
But this one would kind of fall into the like, okay, well, there's going to be a lot of jokes that go over the younger viewers' heads. But at the same time, nothing is so offensive that it couldn't be in a children's block. And it would kind of be maybe not as mature for the adult
Okay.
viewers block. If we're thinking about, I guess it's mostly that there wasn't like an animation for adults outside of The Simpsons as much. Like, obviously, there's King of the
Right,
Hill,
right. Yes,
maybe
yes, yes.
at the
Yeah,
same
okay.
time, but those are all like very specifically adult. And this one is kind of likes to go between both
It's like
audiences.
right, like mostly written on a dialogue level for adults,
Yeah.
animated in a way that it could be for children.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's an interesting dichotomy there
Yeah,
of
I agree.
really really kiddie looking. Like I think they almost want to like make fun of that Mickey Mouse type persona cuz I get it. It's if you think about it, like Disney had Mickey Mouse and Warner Brothers is like, well, we could make some cute characters as well, but we're going to have ours make fun of us the whole time.
Right.
In a weird way, not to make a second 30 Rock reference in one episode, but it does remind me of 30 Rock a little bit in the sense of, Tina Fey wrote a show that's very much about her experience at SNL and NBC and
Mhm.
the parent company. And this show is a lot about them being in Warner Brothers and making fun of kind of the office, the executives, the makings of making a show. And then they also like to just talk about all pop culture in general. They like to make historical references that then tie into it. And that's, I think, where we can start getting into the actual episode. So, yeah, to wrap it all up, our hypothesis is kind of like that they would get to extend their wings a little bit more on Hulu. But I do think as we watched it, we found that it didn't really have to do as much as we thought because the 90s ones took a lot of liberties. I think they got away with it because of the cutesy and childlike animation.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Also, there's to your point, there's a lot of meta lines in here about how cheap of a show they are to produce, and so I imagine that kind of allowed them to have like a little bit of fun just in the way where they weren't really burning a hole into Warner's pockets at the time.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's also, the programming slot of it being a children's show. Maybe not enough, adults that would have gotten offended or angry at it were paying attention or watching.
Probably not. That's yeah,
So they might
bravo.
have gotten the slot in the same way, like, you get slots
Yeah.
in other shows where they're like, this one's a little risky. We're going to put it on Saturdays at 10 a.m. See who watches it. And a lot of people did. I think that the first episode of the new season, I keep rewatching it because I love it so much. I really do.
Okay.
Uh, the I think the two songs in it are just when it first came out, I felt so inspired. Just a weird thing to say.
Oh.
But I just it's very good quick writing. But they have the first song that's all about them. Well, I guess to set the scene in the first episode, It's like supposed to be like Jurassic Park kind of, and they're
Yes.
in like this little Jeep, and there's this couple, and I think also for some reason Jeff Goldblum ends up in the back, or at least a animation character that looks like him at some point. But yeah, they're driving through and they're like have like a pamphlet like, oh, there's these extinct, creatures. And then the Animaniacs come out and they're like, ah. And then Spielberg also comes in and is like, no, they're back. And they do this song where they go into I think it's supposed to be kind of the CEO or Veep of Warner Brothers. And it's this woman who has like an iPad that she's using on the treadmill. And she says, she's like making a joke saying, oh, yeah, this is like, the whole universe and its answers are in this tablet. They're like, I just have to take this tablet. And so Yakko like eats the whole laptop and it kind of like boots him up. And they fill in the gaps between 1998 and 2018 because although it released in 2020, they actually make a note of saying the writers finished this in 2018, so we'll have to fill in some gaps for the
Yeah.
2 years, but we'll just make it up. Yeah, they're very self-aware on the show. I think that's what I like is there's even bits where they'll say things like, well, we have to figure where this is. We have 8 minutes to fill. And yeah, they're very on straightforward with all of their dialogue. But yeah, that particular song goes through all of the political changes from then to now. And yeah, they make some pretty sharp jokes in that one. But then the other song that is really good is the reboot song.
Oh
Is
yeah.
very much it's extra meta because they're a reboot as well. But they were going through every show from kind of the 90s and a little bit before that got rebooted recently, and they're just like, Hollywood doesn't make any new shows anymore. And you're like, it's kind of true. It's a little bit true. And it's but they poke fun at it in such a fun way. Like I can kind of see how you don't get so mad if you're made fun of on this show.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because this is, yeah. I did really enjoy a lot of the jokes in this episode, and especially there's one joke after the first song where they introduce the characters,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they introduce them all by basically the characters needing to speak to each other about how first lines back are always so important. You have to establish character over the first
Oh,
line,
yeah.
and the whole joke is that they do this with every single character that they bring back. Until you meet the first new character, the studio chief, whose first line is an excellent payoff to that joke. That was kind of like the tone being set for me. That was like, okay, this is going to be cool. Yes. It is, yeah. It's kind of fun in the way where I think you're right. It does, like, Animaniacs does bring their flavor to let's talk about the reboot conversation, especially because now that they're a part of it. And the song is a great song to do that. And it's also kind of funny that they get to sort of kind of remind and be like, yeah, and like we are the people to speak on this. We did meta first. Like this is a conversation we're always having. And it is like a really fun conversation. It is a fun episode. I also really like the Pinky and the Brain segment on this, which I guess might be a good time to sort of admit that
Yes.
I fleetingly watched Animaniacs as a child, and I didn't realize that it and Pinky and the Brain were the same show. This one, in similar way to sort of how Animaniacs, has to poke fun at Hollywood, right, and at like the validity of entertainment that's being fed to us.
Yeah.
Pinky and the Brain gets to essentially speak to, well, what does a diabolical takeover the world scheme look like these days? Which they do in a way that might be a little like skeptical in the log line of really the first Pinky and the Brain sketch back is going to be memes. That's a very strong, strong, joke to shoot for. But I kept watching it, and I kept watching the way that they showed how like the brain essentially wanting the audience to respond to a very deliberate meme, much like he was like a clickbait aggregator, and then the true meme that he's able to put out with Pinky that is more organic and does end up taking the world. I was just sitting there like, yep, okay, I agree, yeah, correct, yes, I have nothing more to say on like absolutely. This is why you're back. This is why the show is back.
I know. They did a good job with that one where it was they had this like filter that was like the mind control filter, and then it's supposed to be that everyone just is like obsessed with these cute animal pictures and will do anything they say. But then, Pinky is more scatterbrained and afterwards puts that on another post he makes of this like pig, and then the pig then becomes the one that everyone follows, which I think is funny. It's kind of that thing of like your 15 minutes of fame have now even decreased to like 1 minute of fame or
That's
less.
interesting. Yeah.
And
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
something they were like, and they do another episode where I think the Warner brothers and sister have an app, and they do a lot of jokes about kind of tech developers and apps that are made to be addictive, and
Mm-hmm.
they kind of like show in a not so like the social network way the ulterior motives of these apps and their companies in the same way that they do of the entertainment industry. I think they're kind of showing how these apps are intersecting with entertainment, since there are things like, they even say, I think in that first intro song, like the celebrities are YouTubers now. And even that is like, it's more like TikTok now. But, and I'm sure that'll end up in their later seasons. But they're kind of showing how everything has gone up a notch. And I think that's how some people thought that the political and pop culture satire was amplified in the revival, but I kind of feel like the writers in the show like to do more of like a holding a mirror to things, and it's more that I think if the entire culture has like intensified, it's like, well, then their references will as well,
Right.
because they're just, bouncing off what's going on in the real world and
You're
animaniacsing it.
right. You're getting commentary from quote unquote Warner Brothers personified in these. There is I watched like of the original run. There's this great sort of part in season 1, episode 6, where they have a whole kind of like, what are we? Like what are these creatures? Is it based on Mickey Mouse? Is it, they talk about how they have dog features, that they might be cats, that they have, bunny features, all these things, and they never really land on anything. You never really know what they are. Um, but that's kind of who you get this sort of commentary from these writers. Speaking of episode 6, one of the episodes you
Yes.
recommended for us was the new run, season 1, episode 6. Um,
Yes.
oh yeah, go for it.
Season 1, episode 6, the short little summary is it that Dot discovers a recipe for cuteness. Aliens don't share brains goals and odd political ads. I think the cute song is really funny, and it's also something that's tapping into kind of like, I feel like they basically wanted to make a song that was like, do we make a song all about like emojis and cutesiness? And they do, and they have even like a line that's like, make America more cute. And but the whole thing is that they're in this like, they're dingy, I guess the premise is that the Warner brothers and sister live in the Warner Brothers water tower. It's supposed to be like a studio apartment inside of there, and it's kind of dingy and everything's gross, and she's just upset, and she's just like, I want everything to just be cute. Why can't everything just be cute? And then she eats this like weird like cute fruit, and it makes everything turn like hot pink and like Lisa Frank neon colors and animals, but then everything's also kind of like anime in like a chibi or like cute kind of stocky manner. And but what's funny is that it starts out being this great thing, like everything's like Candyland and kawaii and cute, and then she starts to like go insane in it. And then eventually they're trying to figure out how to get out of the cute world. And that's just it's a tangential song for sure. It's not serving none of these really any part of these sketches are like we're trying to drive a plot line through it all. It's all kind of like sketch variety shows, and they're all, they'll maybe reference things they've done in previous episodes every once in a while, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
really more just for them to have fun with whatever's going on in current events. So they don't really feel like they need to drive anything in a particular direction. But I also like the odd political ads in this one, which was what they did is they said they were talking about third party political candidates that, and I think the actual title was totally insane third party candidates. And it would be people just like getting filmed out in their pool and making these, kind of like overarching statements of like, I'm passing this law so that I can use his pool. And it's her neighbor.
Right.
And then it's all kind of about them like making fun of like a lot of like libertarian and out there candidates that you definitely did see pop up in the 2020 election as well. So they were not far off the course. I could tell that they had to do a bit of predicting of like, do we think like all of this stuff will land in, and that is one credit I'll give this show is that animation cannot be like SNL where they, make it the week of and it goes out. So they do have to be pretty smart with like, we have to be so specific and yet somewhat evergreen. So they walk a fine line of like, what's still going to be funny 2 years from now,
Right.
which, and what will still be a problem, which that being said, those are the comparisons you see with the old run and the new run is like there's a lot they mostly pull at systematic issues
Mm-hmm.
that are difficult to untangle, so they know like this will still be a problem, like political party candidates will still be an issue. They do have a show on there that they call faux news and it's supposed to be Fox News, and it's with uh Tuck. What did they? I know they're
They
making fun of Tucker
one
Carlson,
of the running
but
jokes is that they
they,
didn't respect his name and kept getting it wrong. So I'm not even sure what the actual, which I
I
think
think
is
it's,
to their point. I'm not even sure what the character's name was supposed to be.
I think they put like Tuck Buckerson or
Yeah,
something,
something.
and then yeah, they kept calling him like, yeah, Fred,
Yeah.
and they did a funny thing where they were all supposed to be like polling or being like on the scene in specific areas, and they would all just not be doing what they're supposed to do, and like Dot would get filmed in like Hawaii going like, yeah, it's like such a swing state here. And they would get like really infuriated with them, or they did these like ads too where they were like, yeah, climate change is really bad and what you should do is you should buy a car so someone else can't buy a car that pollutes the environment. And that's like very much a satire on actual ads that go out from corporations. So they're definitely not afraid to really pinpoint
Well,
what they want to make fun of.
yes, and the Tucker Carlson character keeps trying to catch up to. So wait, is this the issue? And what was it? Yako's like, no, this is the issue. And Tucker Carlson's trying to hang on to an issue that they can get them all to discuss and just like vent their feelings about on a show. And yeah,
Yeah, they even say there was one sketch in one of these episodes that was even titled like people who don't want to talk about issues but just yell about them.
exactly. Yes.
And they would have like the faux news, and I think that's like part of what they wanted to do in that sketch is show how like they kept bringing on a new issue and not letting them talk about it to kind of be like those whataboutisms that you see on a lot of those news shows where it's just like someone tries to make a point and they're like, but what about now that this is the real issue is this. And so they were just doing that though to kind of, mess with him, because that's the whole point of being the Animaniacs, is they're like, oh yeah, we're just gonna like, slowly put you into insanity by bringing up more and more topics that you cannot solve. So yeah,
they're
I do love that they do that.
they're a force. This is why they are Pennywise's monster, like own personal monsters in the Halloween special.
Yeah, I think they called him like Nickel Mania Nickel. It wasn't Nickel Mac, but it was something like Nickel Wise. That's what they called him instead of Pennywise. But yeah, I love that he like crawled out of the sewer, and then they're just like, oh, they just start like roasting him pretty much as soon as he comes out, and are like, oh, you a dancing clown? Someone's far from the circus. And you're just like, oh,
He is tortured.
it's good. It's good. But yeah, which brings me to the older episode that I watched that I remember actually these type of episodes. And specifically this one is the President's Song / Don't Tread Us / The Flame Returns. And it's a show, the description officially is a show saluting U.S. history. Warners begin by singing President's Song about all the presidents of the United States. And in colonial America, Pinky and the Brain cry, don't tread on us, as they try to switch their own document with the real Declaration of Independence. And the main part of that episode that I enjoy is the President's Song. They go through every president up until I think they were in Bill Clinton at that time, but they just do snippets with each person, and I look at it and go like, this is the kind of stuff you remember. You don't remember a lot of maybe more tangible and credible history, but you'll remember things like, yep, Taft, fat, got it. Andrew Jackson, racist, got it. Like it just like they went through each one and they did it in their, slapstick lyrical way. Like the songwriting on this show is a big reason of why you watch it. They make most of it into musical comedy. And I was actually reading a quick article from Vulture that was about how the title was How to Make an Animaniacs Song That Truly Captures Life in 2020 by author John Maher. But they do go into how there's different songwriters from the old and the new. So that is something. One of the originals came back, but the first song in the first episode that's about leading up from then to now was actually the two newer songwriters that have added are Crandalls and Nash. And then the original one, who is also on the revival, is Randy Rogel. But they actually, I think, according to this article, had to audition somewhat or apply with the song that got in there, which is the leading up from 1998 to now. So that part that's to me, I'm like, oh, that makes sense that they would put that as you'll get it if you're the one that can nail the bridge between the old and the new season.
That's interesting. I didn't read that. And I am not surprised. The entire time I was watching the new run, I was imagining, I'm like, there has to be some new blood writing these songs, writing some of these episodes, like they're just trying stuff out. And okay, that checks out. That's funny.
Yeah, yeah, because it is a little bit different from when you watch the original ones. It does seem like, I don't want to say there's like less word count, but it kind of does feel like they stick more to a specific structure, and maybe also because they had to fit in commercial breaks and other things, like they're a little bit more like metered.
Oh yeah.
And I noticed in the new one, there's like a big variety with the music as well. Like yes. They have the beginning ones that are very like classic in the world of Animaniacs, like they're doing all of what they're known to do. Making fun of politics, making fun of Hollywood, check, check, check. And in kind of this like old, kind of vintagey
Like the hooray for
musical
Hollywood
style.
kind of way, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas the cute song that you were talking about is just a straight like pop auto tuned kind of
Yeah.
upbeat. Yeah, right.
They definitely
Produced.
wanted the cute song to be the kind of hitting on, yeah, that auto tune kind top
Just a
40,
little too
just
perfect, you know?
bubblegum
Bubblegum.
pop
That's the word I
vibe.
was looking for. Yeah.
And then they also had that song that Pinky tried to use to go viral. That was like, I wanna dance, dance, dance until my legs fall off. And even
Right.
I got that one like stuck in my head as
Hell,
an
it's stuck in
earworm
mine.
because it was very much just like, yeah, it's like a classic kind of just like hook of like, bah, 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 bah. And then they also have the episode where it's like a rap battle. And
Did
they
not see
have
that.
it be this guy starts out doing it, and then Yakko is kind of challenging him, and they're doing it almost in a Hamilton style way because they do have some historical references in there. That's like what I kind of feel like they were trying to spoof of, yet they wanted it in the setting of like a hip hop rap competition because they're clearly in some sort of club. And yeah, so they definitely have like a lot more range, I felt, of musical episodes because it seems like in the older one, they do a lot more historical setting. And so that will then inform the musical songs more so. And in this one, I feel like even though they had some things where like they did the Odyssey where, the not the cyclone, but the
Hmm.
cyclops. There we go. I was like, we were stuck in the hip hop world. Cyclone. No,
Are we in the
cyclops.
Iliad now?
Yeah.
Oh,
They
okay.
had an episode where it was like Homer, but then you got to the cyclops and it was like a giant Trump.
I did not see this.
And it's really funny. And I think when I first watched that, I screenshotted that and sent it to people because I was like, this is just gold. Literally everything's gold because it's a Trump cyclops. But yeah, it was great. And then they do have a Marie Antoinette come in when they're kind of like down on their luck trying to make money and they're just kind of doing the let them eat cake sort of scenario with her. It's when they like say like, oh, we're gonna eat our raw potatoes, but then it's like potato famine, and then it turns into like then uprising in France. It's a little bit of like you're kind of like, where are they going with this one? But they turn it into a thing where they are trying to talk to Marie Antoinette and get her to say let them eat cake. So they just keep like going at her until then they're like, you said the money line. And then it becomes a Hollywood show again. So they do a few historical bits in the new one, but I do think, well, and it's hard because the old one has 5 seasons. So yeah, they have a lot more time to get back into the weeds, but they stayed in current day a lot more here. Like in the second episode, they go to ancient Greece. So that's the one where you see the Cyclops and some Homer action. And then pretty much the rest of it is fairly new age. And yeah, in episode 7 is when they they accidentally start the French Revolution. And then yeah, their log line there too is that Yakko channels Shakespeare to save hip hop, which to me is like, yeah, that's where we're like entering a slight kind of Hamilton-y Lin-Manuel Miranda
Yep.
vibe.
That checks out.
Yeah. But I have to say, I think they just had so much material to use in current days that is part of why they maybe were like, we're going to stay in it. And maybe also that would invite a little bit more of a mature audience, even though I think the historical stuff is hilarious. They did a lot more topical episodes for this new run, which to me is also good for kind of laying the groundwork of, all right, let's snatch the new audience of kind of younger viewers and people who liked the show from before. And then we can get even more into, if we want to go deeper in the historical direction, we then have some time to do so. But people have been reintroduced to what we're all about before we start going all over the place, because it is one where like you ping pong a lot between the sketches. I'd say in the new one, it's a little bit less sporadic. But in the old one, I would go between sketch to sketch to sketch. And like you said, it felt a little bit more like separate tiny shows.
I agree. I wonder if that's the maybe giving some credit here. I wonder if that's the way that the episodes are set up on Hulu, where we watch them, is that the first season actually lists out for the episode titles, like sometimes the 4 skits that the episode comprises of, so you actually can't even see the episode title. Whereas the episodes in the new run are just titled Episode 1, Episode 6.
Yeah.
And they put those sort of what would be on the title cards. Instead, they'll just do sort of like, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen. My favorite, which is also one of my favorite segments in the new run, also a press conference. Which is where they do their skit, their irreverent skit. They do Pinky and the Brain, and then they come back to the Animaniacs, and they come back out, and it's like an athletic press conference, and all the different journalistic publications are there, including the brilliant Burbank Oblivion, and there's just these amazing zingers. Like, you seem a little sweaty for doing one sketch 15 minutes ago. It does seem more sort of like attached, whereas in some of the older runs, you would kind of go from one to the next to the next. And like maybe that was just like production order and putting things in place later. Who knows? But to your point, it's sort of, they're really, really defined and yet separate in the original run, and in the new run, it's more or less like, here's an episode, and maybe the episode is more sort of, maybe not even thematic, but so like you said, it comes out and it is more connected by the beginning and the end of it.
I think so too. You're right that it might have to do with the new platform and not having commercial breaks. I think that, I guess you do still get them on Hulu if you're not on premium, but it's not as long as they would have been in the past. But I don't know. They do seem, maybe that is credit to the newer writers that wanted you to really sit in with the characters a little bit more and not be as kind of, because that was one thing we were talking about before we aired, is that one segment that didn't come back was like Snappy Squirrel. Right. And they seemed like they were always more of like a legal team, I want to say. They had like, or at least the episodes I watched, they did court cases, but that's not to say they did that
I thought she was just an actress in the episode I watched.
Oh,
but I'm less familiar with this series, but she was,
What's weird is I never remembered that sketch at all. Like, I remember Pinky and the Brain a lot. Like, I start to almost like go, I think Pinky and the Brain is my favorite, but then there'll be a scene from Animaniacs and go like, oh, right, you guys are kind of both complement each other. But I do love Pinky and the Brain.
Well, they got their own spin-off series, didn't they?
They did. And I mean, I think it's funny. It's like the laboratory mice, their genes have been spliced. And you're also like, I'm supposed to get that when I'm like 7.
Right.
I'm supposed to know what like gene splicing is, or like that lab test rats happen. And then it's kind of funny, like it's almost like they've made these lab test rats like the Joker, like one of them ends up being like going evil. And then the other one is just like chill. Just kind of permafried.
Did you
chill?
Did you remember the I don't know if they come back in the original run, the dog and the daughter? I forget the names. I watched
like
a great
white kind of skinny faced dog.
Yes.
Like kind of like like I want to say like a long snout. I know, like it's not thinking of the name.
Operation Lollipop was it's also in season 1, episode 6. It's in the same as the What Are We sketch that we mentioned earlier. But that one is like sort of classic animation. and kind of Buttons and Mindy. Thank you, Just the Facts. Came in there with the save.
Yay!
Buttons and Mindy, yes, yeah, they star in skits like Operation Lollipop, and then they're always around it. It's something that this show does really great to kind of string everything together, even when they are separate skits. Is there's always like a fun in animation, always a fun cameo to look out for. So if you're in Pinky and the Brain, like just blink and you'll miss it. Animaniacs will show up. Buttons will show up on the Warner lot sometimes. It's just great animation fun.
Yes. Yeah, they keep it a narrower lens on the newer one. So we'll have to see if they start to add in some of their other characters or if they're trying to trim it down in this new era of Animaniacs.
Yeah,
But
who knows? They started to talk about it during the press conference, but then they got wished away. No season 2 secrets just yet. So Tracy, what are your thoughts overall, just on Animaniacs here?
Overall, I think this show it's on par with a lot of satirical comedies. I do think it's definitely for people who like almost, because in a way they're also making fun of Looney Tunes, so you can't really watch the show and not think like, yeah, there's a little bit of like, if you combined Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny and made these like referential characters that do all the wrong things at all the wrong times, that is what you get. So I think it's a great show. It was a great show to watch in 2020. It'd still be good to watch now, but I will say it was, I think, very comforting to watch more deep in the quarantine because they were able to pinpoint a lot. And I know they had to write this show before lockdown, but they did actually edit some jokes to be relevant and also took stuff out. Like I read in an interview, and I'll have to find the article to link, but that they had a joke about a virus or something and they had to totally just scrap that since that came to fruition. So, which is also like not kudos to the writers, but you're also like, wow, you guys really can predict a lot of stuff. But I think my favorite parts of this show is the musical comedy aspect. Like, if I do like watching the episodes, but I think I would find myself going back and back to like, oh, which was this song from this episode? And yeah, it's something that I'm glad it's back, because when you do look at a lot of cartoons from the 90s, there is kind of this requirement that there have to be songs of some sort that you don't have in as many shows all the time on a consistent basis, with the exception of Bob's Burgers. They always have Bob's Burgers always has an end credits song that is really well written and has to do with like the conclusion of the episode. And I'm always like really impressed that in addition to like writing this show and doing the episode, you also make sure to have like your unique closing song. So that's something I like about Bob's Burgers. But other than that, there's, Family Guy, because Seth MacFarlane is a musician and singer extraordinaire. They have a lot of musical episodes and a lot of kind of musical components, but it's a little bit different. I think Animaniacs is like they have to have a song within every like 5 minutes or the show is not going on. So that's something I really enjoy as a viewer, and I think it is kind of a differentiator between this show and others, because they're all just like they're like a slapstick comedy musical show. So it's not quite as much as of a musical show, say like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, but we're getting kind of into that territory. They're just not all Broadway artists, but they do kind of like to take small snapshots of things that are either, pop culture or politics or just kind of grievances of Hollywood and
Definitely
make it
plenty of
into a
that.
show.
Absolutely. If you like the meta humor, if you want some commentary, and if you want it all through the cynical lens of show business, Animaniacs has you covered, old and new run. And if you might have missed or might miss there are still plenty of 20th century references sprinkled into the dialogue. They still do make time for some great ones in the new run.
Yes.
But yeah, but they're speaking it now. They are back. And what's their tag? They're zany as ever. How does that go? How does the song go? Something like that.
They
But
did, and they have, yeah, there's Zany as ever. We did Meta first.
did Meta
And then
first.
and then they have like, there's a small part of the theme song where they always tweak what it is. And
Oh, yeah.
in the beginning episode, it's one thing, and it's like the one thing that kind of keeps building on each theme song. But in terms of 20th century references, one part of the original show before the 2020 that we wanted to talk about is that they are known for doing really good spoofs on everything. But one spoof that kind of caught us off guard was the spoof on Friends.
Okay. All right. Yeah, you're right. Watching this series for the first time, so I a lot of the episodes that I sort of sampled from the original run were at the recommendation of an article from Nerdist.
Yes.
And in there was sort of this. I must have read this wrong. It was like this loving, Animaniacs go and they hang out with friends out in New York, and they call it acquaintances. And they do a clever, fun song about like acquaintances that pokes fun at the sort of what's the way to say it? What's the way to say like Friends? What's your cynical log line on Friends?
So, as someone who likes Friends but doesn't love Friends, like I'm a more of a like you can take it or leave it, and other people are diehard friends. I would say like, it's a New York City apartment show. They just kind of like hang out. There are some moments that you remember. I feel like there's a lot that happens that's just kind of like, you know, the days go by. It's the days of our lives. But yeah, which one of the writers on Animaniacs was not a Friends fan because they pretty much were saying like they took quite liberties of being like nothing happens on this show. This show is about nothing, but not like in a Seinfeld way. And they called it Acquaintances. They kind of had the theme song a little bit and made fun of it throughout, but I think the weird part for me is I was like, well, if you're gonna make fun of Friends, you really didn't give yourself enough time to do it because it's a pretty short segment.
Yeah, that was
And they just
interesting.
kind of make fun of the general like pitch of the show of it being like a New York City apartment show, which are kind of like, I mean, they've made a few since then. It's clearly a popular setting and way to do a show. So, but yeah, they don't really go like it's weird. They stay very surface level in this spoof. And I thought that was odd and wondering if you're in the chat and you happen to have some real niche insight into why that might be. I was like spitballing whether they either were trying to not be too scathing or if they had to toe a line because it was another network show, even though it was on a different network. But I don't know. Daniel, what were your thoughts on this one? Did you think that they didn't go far enough or went too far?
No, you know what I found interesting actually about this one is that I had to check when this aired because they do the theme song, they do the intro, and then they go in, they start hanging out and basically roasting. This show takes 10 minutes to roast like the top show being produced on their lot. And it's interesting because they're basically like going after all of these like sort of jokes that happened or that were the show during the show's like first and second season run, which aren't the strongest jokes of the series, and the Friends creators, there's plenty of interviews about how some of the jokes are somewhat corny, and it's interesting that in this sort of parody, there's sort of like there's a lot of Marcel, which is like the monkey from season one. There's a lot of
Yeah.
Fat Monica. There's a lot of just like really early on jokes. While the series, and like the one that threw me was there was this very much like the beginning of the Ross and Rachel storyline being poked at. Even though, and this is
Oh.
where I was like, wait a minute, like I'm watching like a season 4, season 5. I'm watching a season 5, episode 3, episode of the Animaniacs. Wasn't this Friends season like 4? It's interesting because it's like, wow, that's it's like it's essentially like the skit as it aired was poking fun at a series like 3 years prior that had, I don't know, nobody was gonna know it when they were animating it. Season 4, like I like Friends. I like Friends. I happen to think that season 4 is actually a pretty good season of television.
That
For
is
what's
actually a
rest,
pretty, like, I will say, as someone who doesn't, I rewatched Friends, I think when it originally went to Netflix, and I think that's kind of like I used to love it, and then I rewatched it and was like, there's some things that like rubbed me the wrong way as an adult that I was like, I don't feel the same about this show as I once did. Even though like I still, I think it's a very like, even though they say the jokes are corny, that's kind of why it's a comforting show for a lot of people to
of
watch, and
course,
it's something, like I'm not going to, throw someone off if I put this on in the background while we hang out. Like it's kind of a universally appreciated show on some level. Like you could be a fan favorite or just kind of like me where you're like, it's nice.
yeah,
It's good.
yeah,
And there's and
that's all it needs to be at the 8 p.m. time slot. But
but
it is
the
interesting.
interesting part is
Hmm.
that it goes back to kind of where we were at the beginning, where if this show truly was aimed for kids, you probably wouldn't be watching Friends.
Right, but you probably that's interesting. I wonder if I were a kid and I were watching Animaniacs, spoof Friends, if I were just going to be like, "Oh yeah, that's that show that comes on at night that, that everybody
Yeah.
seems to watch." And I recognize, I don't know, maybe not. I will say, and they tried it's funny how difficult. I don't know if this is just I don't know. It seems really difficult to nail Matt LeBlanc's likeness in animation, or really in
Yeah.
any
Actually, that's
facet.
a good point.
Um, I mean, but they were spot on. Like Rachel Ross, they did a great Schwimmer in animation and
They did
whatnot.
a great Schwimmer
They
in
did a great
animation.
Schwimmer. But yeah, it was an interesting skit. It honestly, after that song, I just kind of felt, I don't know. I felt like it was like the equivalent of if we decided that we wanted to touch on Friends on Primetime Party Time, we would have done like Ghosts of Primetime's Past Joey.
Yeah.
Which, yeah. But otherwise, Animaniacs. Um, Otherwise, they're pretty spot on. Yeah, yeah, they have a lot of
No,
fun.
it's to say that all of their other spoofs are incredible. They do really great work. And I think we just mostly watched this one and we're kind of like, this one kind of doesn't, go par for the course as the others did as much, but it still was like you said, they do some great animated work with how the characters look, and they, write the song to be like the theme song, and they show a lot of actual of the parodies. And you do start to wonder, like you're saying, with, if you would at least as a kid go like, oh, that's that show everyone talks about on at night. And then you're like, well, is that going to make them want to watch that show in the same way they do parodies of these other landmark shows in television and movies?
Hmm.
Because they did that in the Mary Tyler Dot episode I watched, where they do the Mary Tyler Moore theme song, but it's Dot. And it is kind of like mocking that in a way, but it's kind of, I get the vibe from the Animaniacs that's like we mock what we love. in a lot of
Yeah?
ways.
Okay.
Like, I mean, there are some things that obviously the political humor, not so
I was
much.
gonna say, you guys,
But the Hollywood and television and movie realm, it does seem like they pick stuff that
it's all-
are big brands
yeah.
that they make fun of. Because I think they're kind of like, they can take it. We're not making fun of independent movies and budding shows. We're making fun of, the most popular show in America in its fourth season. They'll be okay. So I think that's another part of it as well. You might feel like it's, mean spirited if it wasn't like, well, they're doing all right. And they do make some points in their song. So I think, yeah, a lot of the things that you watch the show because you can take a joke and also because you like watching people kind of go, nothing is off the table. We can put anything in here. It doesn't seem like they feel anyone is off limits since they make fun of themselves so much. And, it's the whole show is kind of like being like Warner Brothers is this almost like the Roger Rabbit universe as well. So I think that's just why, their tagline a lot of times is we did meta first. It's a very, very meta show. And so if you like that kind of humor where it's like it's making fun of itself, it's making fun of everyone, and doing it usually to music and lyrics, then Animaniacs is for you, I have to say. Each time I watch it, I find a new joke I love even more.
Across 5 seasons, 99 episodes, 575 individual skit segments, I think I read, plus 13 new, 2 more seasons on the way, and a movie. There's a little bit of Animaniacs for everybody out there. For us, that's it for this week's Primetime Party Time. Thank you for joining us. The show could not have been made without the following amazing people. We're talking, our artwork was done by Fen. Find her at FenLatte on Instagram. Our theme song was done by JWright. Find him at jwrightmusic.com. Website, thanks in part to Coco. You can find us, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Hit us up at info@ptptshow.com, on our voicemail, on ptptshow.com as well. Or wherever you want to find us. If you just want to rant, roast, and rave, we'll be around. Listen to us live next Monday here at 9 p.m. for another Prime Time Party Time. Wow, usually we get through that fast. Barely made it that time. What do you think, Tracy? Good show?
Good show. Yeah. I feel like we had a good balance of what we loved, the parts that, we are like, but I think we did it in a constructive